Chapter 1, Rebirth. She's my sister. How can my heart not ache for her? But the dead have to make way for the living. It's not easy for us to have a joyous occasion at home. We can't let her death ruin our life. Thinking back to his life, Wellbeing immediately felt that it was ridiculous, and resentment arose in her heart. When the familiar words sounded in her ears again, Wellbeing tried her best to open her eyes. Suddenly, her closed eyes opened with a cold look. Wellbeing looked at the corridor in front of her and was stunned for a long time. Didn't she die in the hospital? Why would she be in an old house that had been demolished? Wellbeing walked to her house in confusion. The door was not closed tightly, and there was a gap. They were having a loud argument about building a village. Wellbeing realized that she had transmigrated to the period when her family was choosing people to go to the countryside to do rural construction. Through the crack in the door, she saw the family talking in the living room. Wellbeing raised her head and said hatefully, "I won't go to the countryside to do construction. Either your precious son will go, or that sickly person will go. Do you think I don't feel sorry for you? I asked long ago. The factory said that Wellbeing is weak. If she goes to the countryside, she can't help them. She would even cause trouble for them. They don't want her." As Mrs. Yu spoke, she tapped Wellbeing's head with her hand. Although the Yu family favored boys over girls, the eldest daughter was their first child. Comparatively, the parents still doted on her more. "I don't care. Think of a way yourself." Wellbeing sat on the sofa. Mr. Yu and Mrs. Yu looked at each other helplessly. Yu knew that it was impossible for his parents to send their only child to the countryside. He calmly nestled on the sofa and thought about how he would ask Mrs. Yu for 50 cents to watch a movie with Tan Datu and the others later. When Wellbeing saw this scene, she couldn't help but sneer. She pushed open the door and pretended not to know anything. She greeted her family and entered Wellbeing's room. Wellbeing's eyes darted around before she stood up and entered the room. Wellbeing held Wellbeing's hand and forcefully squeezed out a few drops of tears. "Wellbeing, our family has to send someone to the countryside to do construction. I have a hard life. I stopped studying in my teens and came out to work to support everyone." In reality, Wellbeing didn't want to study anymore after graduating from primary school. She stayed at home for a few years. At that time, her grandfather, who worked in a supply company for supermarkets, died. Mrs. Yu was the only daughter, so the vacant position was naturally taken by Wellbeing. In this era where supplies were scarce, it was an impressive thing to be able to work in a supply company. Wellbeing showed off in the neighborhood for a long time. After Wellbeing was done acting pitiful, she said, "You're young and weak. If you go, after your brother and I marry in 2 years, our parents can use this reason to transfer you back. At that time, our family of 5 can stay." Wellbeing was born sickly, so she was a burden at home. In her previous life, Wellbeing had also used this reason to let Wellbeing go to the countryside. After Wellbeing refused because of her ill health, Wellbeing immediately married her pursuer in order to avoid going to the countryside to do construction. Her parents refused to let their son go to the countryside to suffer, so the burden fell on Wellbeing. Wellbeing also blamed Wellbeing for her misfortune after marriage. Wellbeing believed that it was because Wellbeing didn't agree to go to the countryside that Wellbeing had no choice but to get married in a hurry. In the end, she met a bad person. "I'm not in good health. I'm afraid I won't be able to survive until the day I return to the city," Wellbeing said slowly with her head lowered. How could it be that easy to return? Not to mention the lack of government policy dictating the return to the city in recent years. Even if there was later, how could those local people who determined whether or not they returned release them without obtaining enough benefits? How many girls had to sell their bodies to get a spot? Although Wellbeing had already made up her mind to go to the countryside, she didn't intend to agree so easily. Wellbeing continued to persuade her, "You used to sit around all day without exercising when you were studying. Coincidentally, you don't need to study anymore after high school. You might get better after working there. But I heard from Auntie Jiang that Jiang Yuan sent a letter back saying that farm work is especially heavy there and that he doesn't eat well. I can at least eat until I'm half full at home. He's such a healthy person, but he's already tired and sick after only 2 months. I don't want to delay your marriage either. I'm not even afraid of being tired. I'm just afraid that I won't be able to eat my fill and have enough clothes to wear. If I go, I won't even be able to work. I'm afraid I won't be able to survive." With that said, Wellbeing raised her head and looked at Wellbeing with her usual timid gaze. When Wellbeing heard that Wellbeing seemed to have wavered, she immediately expressed her stance. "Don't worry. As long as you agree, I'll tell Dad and Mom to bring more food stamps for you." In this era, money was not the only thing that mattered when buying things. One also had to have the corresponding food stamps and clothing stamps before others would sell them to them. Wellbeing lowered her head and tugged at the corner of her shirt with both hands. I have to take 30-pound food stamps, 20 feet clothing stamps, and 70 yuan. I might never come back. I have to take more money as backup. Yu Bing had already planned it all out. In her previous life, because the Yu family only gave her a few food stamps and 5 yuan, in order to save money, she couldn't even afford eggs. With her already weak body, she collapsed from exhaustion after harvesting crops in the countryside. After that, she developed the syndrome of panting after taking only a few steps. After that, every time her family sent a letter asking her to send food, she would immediately send food back at the expense of scrimping and saving herself. Once, she was so famished that she almost died. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 2, Condition. Later, she found out that the Yu family had no problem eating their fill. In this life, she would no longer live for these people. She would live for herself. At this moment, Yu Pan wanted to jump up and curse when she heard that she wanted 70 yuan. However, she thought about it and immediately stopped herself. After all, 70 yuan was only 2 months of her salary. It was still very worth it for her to continue being a city girl. Her mother had always safe-kept her salary. After Yu Pan understood, she immediately left the room to ask Mrs. Yu. The mother and daughter fought in the living room over this matter. In the end, as expected, it ended in Yu Pan's victory. Mr. Yu and Mrs. Yu called Yu Bing out of the living room. Yu Bing knew that her parents wanted her to express her stance clearly. Dad, Mom, as long as you give me enough stamps and money, I can go to the countryside to do construction. Yu Pan pulled Yu Bing to his side with a smile. Little Bing is knowledgeable and sensible. The elders say that there is much to be done in the world. I definitely won't be able to do much there with my primary school educational level. Only you intellectuals can help build the country. Mr. Yu and Mrs. Yu were very happy to see their youngest daughter take the initiative to go to the countryside. Although the factory had objections, it couldn't stop people from voluntarily answering to the country's call. This would lessen their trouble greatly. Thus, the two of them hurriedly ran to find someone to let Yu Bing take Yu Wu's place. When they were preparing dinner, Yu Bing suggested that Mrs. Yu take out the food stamps and money for her so that she could set off directly in a few days. Mrs. Yu stammered as she changed the topic. Let's eat first. Yu Bing stood at the door and watched coldly. She said calmly, Mom, if you don't give it to me now, I'll go upstairs and tell factory manager Mr. Chen that my body suddenly can't take it and I can't go. You'd asterisk him in, girl. How much money do I usually spend on your medicine? You're already at this age, but you still have to ask for money from your family when you go to the countryside to work. Mrs. Yu scolded sternly as she served the dishes. In fact, Yu Bing's body was weak and needed supplements. However, during that era, it was difficult to buy nutritional supplements even if one had money. Every family ate the same food. It didn't cost any money to go to the bathroom in the factory. Moreover, the factory had subsidies for such situations. Yu Bing didn't need to spend much money on medicine. Seeing that the matter was settled, Mrs. Yu started to feel distress over the 70 yuan. The family had been saving for half a year and planned to find a girlfriend for their son. Yu Pan was afraid that Yu Bing would change her mind, so she immediately added, Mom, didn't we agree? If you're unwilling, I'll get married immediately and let your precious son go. Let's see if you're still unwilling to part with that 70 yuan. When Mrs. Yu saw that her elder daughter was throwing a tantrum and that her younger daughter's attitude was firm, she could only angrily take out the money and food stamps from her room and throw them at Yu Bing. What a debt collector! Yu Bing squatted down and picked up the money and food stamps one by one with a cold gaze. In the next few days, Yu Bing jogged in the courtyard for half an hour every morning and night. During the day, she looked forward to going to work. She practiced yoga in her room for an hour every day in preparation for going to the countryside. The night before they set off, the Yu family had just finished eating when they heard a knock on the door. Yu Bing got up to open the door and realized that it was her best friend, Jiang Chun. This was the first time the two of them had met in their lives. Yu Bing suddenly felt a lump in her throat and her eyes was a little blurry. Seeing this, Jiang Chun immediately pulled Yu Bing under the tree downstairs. Don't cry, little Bing. We're going to the same place. I'll take care of you. Don't be afraid. Jiang Chun comforted Yu Bing while wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Yu Bing could no longer control her emotions. She hugged the person in front of her and thought to herself that in her previous life, it was Jiang Chun who protected her. In this life, it was her turn to protect Jiang Chun. Jiang Chun didn't know that the reborn Yu Bing only wanted to stay away from her family. She thought that she was afraid of leaving her family and going to the countryside alone, so she comforted her gently. It took Yu Bing a long time to control her emotions. Seeing that Yu Bing had calmed down, Jiang Chun said with heartache, Your brother is strong enough to kill a cow. You've never been in good health since you were young. I didn't expect your parents to be so heartless as to let you replace him. But don't worry, I can protect you even in the countryside. Jiang Chun's words warmed Yu Bing's heart. Don't worry, I'll take care of my body. I'll be fine. As the two of them were talking, they saw Yan Yin walking past them angrily. Jiang Chun bumped Yu Bing's shoulder and whispered, Do you know? Yan Yin is coming with us. Yu Bing looked at Yan Yin's back coldly and didn't speak. In her previous life, Yan Yin had indeed gone to the countryside. This fiance who claimed to be her childhood friend had even set a trap for her with that person. In her previous life, she didn't have the time to settle this score. In this life, she had to settle it properly. Jiang Chun continued to tell her what she knew. I heard that it's because Yao Ling is preparing to get married. She works in the food bureau and her parents are both supervisors. Otherwise, the Yao family wouldn't have let Yan Yin go to the countryside. After Yu Bing heard this, the corners of her mouth curled up into a cold smile. As expected, it was the same as in her previous life. These days, there were a few families that didn't favor boys over girls. Only when they obtained enough benefits from their daughters would there be the situation of favoring girls over boys. However, Yan Yin's unhappiness was her source of joy. Yu Bing looked forward to seeing if Yan Yin could withstand her revenge in this lifetime. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 3, Departure. Because they were leaving early tomorrow morning, the two of them still had to pack their luggage, so they didn't talk much and returned home. As soon as Yu Bing entered, he realized that there were only Mrs. Yu and Yu Pan in the living room. The atmosphere was a little off. Mrs. Yu leaned against the sofa and crossed her arms in front of her chest with anger in her eyes. Yu Bing, you slut! I was wondering why you were so proactive in volunteering to build the village. So you only took the initiative to mention it because you knew that Yan Yin would also go. To think that I even gave you so much money and stamps since I was afraid that you would suffer. Take out half of all the stamps and leave them at home. You can only bring 5 yuan with you. Mrs. Yu sat up straight and pointed at Yu Bing. Yu Bing looked at Yu Pan, who was sitting beside Mrs. Yu with her legs crossed while munching on melon seeds, as if she was watching a good show. She understood that Yu Pan must have started to sow discord again. Although Yu Pan was just over 20 years old, she was famous for being a gossipy woman in the neighborhood. Yu Bing had died once before, so how could she be afraid of Mrs. Yu's threat? He said helplessly, Since Mom thinks that my motive for going to the countryside is not pure, I won't go. I'll take out the money and food stamps later. Mrs. Yu froze, and Yu Pan, who was eating melon seeds, also stopped. In fact, this was indeed Yu Pan's doing. She just felt that if Yu Bing left home, there would be no one for her to bully anymore. She just made up some lies in front of her mother in order to see Yu Bing being scolded. Mrs. Yu wanted to use this as an excuse to deduct more money and stamps. Unfortunately, what they didn't know was that the Yu Bing in front of them was no longer the person they were familiar with. She wasn't someone who the Yu family could make suffer and mercilessly exploit. She was no longer someone who silently endured and didn't dare to resist. Mrs. Yu slammed the table and roared, You wretched girl! Are you threatening me? Yu Bing walked to the armchair and sat down. She held her chest and said with an uncomfortable expression, Mom, I haven't gone to the countryside yet. It's not too late for me to give up the spot now. I suddenly feel a little pain in my chest. Yu Pan widened her eyes. From the looks of it, the situation was a little out of control. She was afraid that something unexpected would happen. Yu definitely wouldn't go. In the end, it would be over for her if she went. Yu Pan hurriedly held Mrs. Yu's arm and whispered into her ear, Mom, she might not be able to return for the rest of her life. She's a sickly person. Our family won't have to pay for her food anymore. No matter what, these stamps and money are worth it. Mrs. Yu was also scheming. In this era, it was indeed difficult to find a job through connections. Her son had yet to find a job. This time, she could send off this sickly person with an excuse. Not only could she fill the spot, but this could also save the money. It was indeed a profitable deal. Yu Bing, don't think that we can't control you. If you dare to do anything embarrassing, I'll break your legs. I'll sever all ties with you. Mrs. Yu threatened. In the past, Yu Bing would panic and be afraid that her parents would be angry. However, at this moment, she only felt calm and didn't want to pretend to be polite with them anymore. She only said calmly, I'm setting off tomorrow. I'll pack my things first. With that, she returned to her room, leaving the two of them looking at each other. The next morning, just after 7 o'clock, Yu Bing took 2 large bags containing clothes, a net bag containing a hot water bottle, a basin, a lunchbox, and some food that she had fought for from her mother in the morning. She set off alone on the journey to build the village. The train station. The train station was bustling. They were all parents who were sending their children off. The Yu family was still angry about what happened last night and morning, so they didn't send her off. Yu Bing squeezed into the car with all his might and looked for her seat. She saw that Jiang Chun, who wasn't far away, had already seen her. Afraid that Jiang Chun wouldn't see her, Yu Bing stood up and waved her hands vigorously. Yu Bing smiled for the first time today. Chun Chun. Come, give me the heavy one. Jiang Chun took a few steps forward and brought the clothes to the seat. She turned around and took the net before placing it under the seat. She pulled Yu Bing to sit in the inner seat. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 4, Meeting. Clang. 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 Accompanied by the rhythmic sound of the train, Jiang Chun and Yu Bing, who had been sitting on the train for a long time, fell asleep. When Yu Bing woke up, it was already evening. Jiang Chun, who was sitting on the outside and leaning on her shoulder, hadn't changed her posture from the time she fell asleep to the time she woke up. She only tilted her head and listened to the people in the neighboring seats tell stories with relish. Yu Bing was moved when she saw the scene, so she massaged Jiang Chun's stiff shoulders. Jiang Chun noticed and turned around. Xiao Bing, you're awake. You don't have to massage me. I'll just stand up and move around a little. Just sit tight. I've enjoyed the afternoon nap. Now, it's your turn to enjoy it. Yu Bing smiled. Jiang Chun smiled. All right, then just massage me for a few minutes. Massage is a tiring task. Yu Bing looked at the girl who was always smiling and couldn't help but think of Jiang Chun, who had always smiled and encouraged her no matter how difficult things were in her previous life. Therefore, when she returned there this time, she had to plan thoroughly before that time. She couldn't let Jiang Chun be schemed against. Jiang Chun looked at the person sitting next to her and licked her lips. She touched her stomach and turned to look at Yu Bing. Bing, let's eat now. To save food, we didn't even eat lunch. I'm starving. Yu Bing was also hungry and nodded vigorously. The two of them took out food from the net under their seats. Yu Bing took out a white steamed bun and 2 eggs, then handed an egg to Jiang Chun. As Jiang Chun took out her homemade pickled vegetables as she rejected Yu Bing, little Bing, I brought food. Keep it for yourself. Yu Bing shook her head helplessly and stuffed the egg into Jiang Chun's hand. Eat it. I brought more. Your pickled vegetables are delicious. I want to take a few more bites. Take it as me exchanging with you. Jiang Chun knew that Yu Bing was only finding an excuse to let her accept the egg. She lowered her head and looked at the egg in her hand. She thought to herself that she must help Yu Bing work more when she reached the countryside. At this moment, the train stopped. The words Linshui City were written on the platform. Yu Bing's pupils dilated as she looked at the familiar figure on the platform. Then, she leaned against the car window and turned her body to face Jiang Chun while eating the last bite of dinner. She then pretended to listen to everyone's conversation carefully. When the train started again, she silently straightened her body. In her previous life, she had also sat by the car window. When Yu Yin passed by the car window and saw her, she took the initiative to talk to her. The two of them started to interact after that. But now that she had ruined this opportunity, Yu Bing wanted to see if the wheel of destiny would change. After the train traveled for a while, everyone found their seats and chatted with the people they sat with. Just as Yu Bing thought that this person would disappear from her life, a tall woman with a round face and almond-shaped eyes appeared in front of her again. Yu Yin was wearing a fashionable polyester plaid shirt, fitting green military pants, and a military kettle on her back. Her outfit was very chic in this era, and it made everyone's eyes light up. Then, she smiled and introduced herself generously. Hello, everyone. My name is Yu Yin. You're all going to the countryside, right? Can I sit here with you? A couple went to visit their relatives with a few children. I saw that it was inconvenient, so I took the initiative to find another seat. In this era, most people were simple-minded, passionate, and kind. Yu Yan's actions indeed made these teenagers have a good impression of her. One by one, they hurriedly squeezed out seats for her. A man even took the initiative to take the bamboo rattan box containing the clothes and helped place it on the iron shelf above the seat. Yu Bing sneered. She was certain that Yu Yin had always been prepared for her. The train had been driving for so long, so she must have passed by so many seats, but none of them were suitable for her, and their place, which was fully packed, was suitable for her. You look so familiar. What's your name? Yu Bing looked up. Yu Yin was sitting at the outermost side of the row opposite Yu Bing and smiling at her. My name is Yu Bing. Perhaps it's because of my average-looking face, but people often say that I look familiar to someone they know, Yu Bing replied with a smile. Yu Yin paused slightly. This answer was beyond her expectations, and she didn't know how to answer. She looked at her third sister, who had an oval face and almond-shaped eyes like her, and suppressed the urge to lambaste her. After all, it wasn't time yet. Country life was too boring. She had a third sister to pass the time with. She wanted the Yu families to know how outstanding she was. They had chosen the wrong daughter to give away. At the same time, Yu Yin was very curious. Between the two of them, did one look more like their father and one look more like their mother? Hence, she continued to smile and said, "You must be joking. I didn't expect us to have the same surname. What a coincidence. I keep feeling that you seem familiar and I can't help but want to get close to you. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." Chapter 5, couldn't help but snub her. In her previous life, Yu Bing was happy when she heard Yu Yan's words. She wasn't in good health and rarely went out to play. She only had Jiang Chun, her best friend. Therefore, in her previous life, she rushed to befriend her. Every time Yu Yin needed something, she would look for her. Yu Yin would coax her with sweet words and Yu Bing be willing to help her do anything after hearing them. Yu Yin would even frame Yu Bing time and time again. Now that she thought about it, Yu Bing wished she could slap herself. Yu Bing recalled her previous life experience, but she didn't show it on her face. She pretended to be confused and said, "Is that so? If we have the same surname, then we might really have been a family 500 years ago." She pretended to recall for a few seconds and said seriously, "I'm sure my family doesn't have any relatives in Linshui City. Moreover, my parents said that I always look silly and non-threatening, so many people want to get close to me. This time, they even reminded me to be careful when I'm out." Jiang Chun knew about the Yu family's situation and didn't understand why Yu Bing said the exact opposite. However, she believed that Yu Bing must have a reason for doing this, so she sat at the side without saying anything. When Yu Yin heard this, the smile on her face froze. Yu Bing looked at Yu Yan's expression and covered her mouth. "Miss Yu, don't misunderstand. My parents aren't talking about you. They're talking about those bad people. You don't look like a bad person." Yu Bing knew too well what kind of words could make Yu Yin uncomfortable. At this moment, Yu Yin was indeed feeling worse than if she had swallowed a fly. If she had seen that Yu Bing wasn't favored in the family, she would have felt better. However, Yu Bing's words had clearly indicated that the Yu family protected her. Yu Yin only felt that Yu Bing had snatched the happiness that should have belonged to her. She even thought that her parents were targeting her. What did they mean by wanting to get close to her and being more careful? Who were they guarding against? At this moment, Yu Yin no longer had the urge to continue talking. She only sat quietly in her seat. A girl sitting beside her felt the awkwardness and quickly tried to smooth things over. "We are good young people who support the country's construction. We're all good people." Then, the others changed the topic, and the atmosphere slowly returned to normal. Unknowingly, everyone chatted until late at night before falling asleep. Just as the sun rose from the ground in the east, the train arrived at the station. A few young people who had the same destination alighted with their luggage. Yu Bing watched as Yu Yin took the car to the Fengtu Mountain Commune in Jiangning County. After arriving at the commune, they took an ox cart to the Yi Mountain Brigade. The car swayed and smelled of gasoline. Yu Bing resisted the urge to vomit and finally got out of the car. Looking at the sunroof car ox cart in front of her, Yu Bing felt alive again when she smelled the fresh air. The ox cart had pulled people and things. It had basically pulled everything. The driver had even specifically washed it last night before picking them up. However, it still looked dirty after so many years of usage. Although Yu Yin lived with her adoptive parents, she had been doted on by her family since she was young and had never suffered much. She looked at the ox cart in front of her with disdain. "Can't you change it? It's so dirty and it smells. My clothes and pants are stained from it." The old man was a straightforward person and couldn't stand such pampered behavior. He said angrily, "If you don't want to sit in it, you can walk back to the village." Although the other threes who supported the construction of the village also despised the ox cart, they knew that the village didn't have anything better. It was better than walking, so they naturally wouldn't complain. Jiang Chun wasn't a high-maintenance person. After seeing Yu Bing put down her luggage and step into the ox cart, she followed him into the cart. The old man driving the cart didn't expect this thin young lady to lead the way into the car. He originally thought that she was a pampered young lady, but who knew that the one complaining was the tall and muscular young lady? He thought to himself that one really couldn't judge a book by its cover. After Yu Yin saw everyone get into the carriage, she stomped her feet and followed them into the ox cart. She felt a little resentful that Yu Bing, who had taken the lead to get into the car, was deliberately going against her to embarrass her. She wanted to use the soft approach to approach Yu Bing, but now, she couldn't help but say, "Little Bing, I heard that farming is quite tiring. What if you faint since you're so frail? Wouldn't this implicate everyone's progress? She was undoubtedly insulting Yu Bing in front of this group of companions who had come to the countryside to build. After all, no one wanted a burden in their team. Before Yu Bing could speak, Jiang Chun was so angry that she contorted, "Who are you trying to slander? According to what you're saying, you're so burly, so you should be dispatched to the wilderness." Yu Yan had heard praises since she was young. When Jiang Chun suddenly said this, she immediately lost her temper. "Who are you calling burly? I'm just healthy. I'll scold whoever looks for trouble." Jiang Chun turned around and glared at Yu Yan with anger. Yu Yan was someone who bullied the weak and feared the strong. When she saw that Jiang Chun wasn't to be trifled with, she calmed down and sat at the side gloomily. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 6, I'm back again. The ox cart drove on the yellow dirt road in the field. The villagers in the paddy fields on both sides were working hard. The scene gave off a sense of vitality. The old man drove the car to the entrance of the village and stopped. He pointed at the bungalow not far away and said, "The village has arranged a temporary dormitory for you all. You can reach it after walking straight for a few hundred meters. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. It's very easy to recognize. The village chief is waiting for you guys there. I still have to rush to the field to work. Get off the cart and walk over." Yu Bing knew that it was the harvest season. If the harvest was reduced late in the season, the already tight supply of food would be even more insufficient. This was a matter of life and death. Although she was weak and her body was already a little tired from the long ride, she could still slowly walk a few hundred meters. When the others heard the old man's words, they all understood. Only Yu Yan was dissatisfied. However, when she saw that everyone had gotten out of the car to get their luggage, she couldn't say anything else. She only muttered indignantly as she got out of the car, "I'm already exhausted from sitting in the car for so long. I still have to walk with so many things. He's not even willing to send us for a few hundred meters more." People say that villagers are compassionate, but they can't even do this simple task. The old man couldn't stand Yu Yan to begin with. In order to pick them up, he had already delayed half a day's work. Now that he was being complained about, he became angry and shouted, "Young lady, do you think I can't hear you muttering behind my back? If you have any objections, say it loudly. You're so fussy and high maintenance. You guys haven't even started working, but you're already accusing others for being weak and about to faint. She took a long bus here just like you, but she didn't say that she couldn't walk a few hundred meters. You're so burly, yet you still talk so much nonsense. I think you just look burly. That little girl might even be stronger than you, yet you say that she's weak." Seeing that they had already taken their things out of the car, the old man didn't give Yu Yan a chance to retort. He directly chased the ox head straight to the field, leaving Yu Yan fuming. When Yu Bing saw this, she pursed her lips and chuckled. In her previous life, she was stupid and was instigated by Yu Yan to discuss it with him. He pitied her for her poor health and sent them to a place. However, it was also because of this that Yu Yan used this as an excuse to say that she was weak and sickly, causing her to be ostracized the moment she arrived in the village. After all, no one wanted to have another burden in their team. Later, she coaxed her into thinking she was doing this to help her get an easy job. In this life, if she didn't take her bait and no one helped Yu Yan, her plans would indeed be disrupted. The 6 of them walked to the temporary shelter under the scorching sun and saw a burly man standing in the courtyard. He was about 40 years old and his patched clothes and pants were stained with mud. He seemed to have just rushed over from the ground. When he saw them, he smiled and shook hands with them one by one. "Comrades, it's been hard on you. I'm the village chief of Hashan village, Sun Wang." Only then did everyone officially introduce themselves. The bespectacled and scholarly boy was called Lu Ming. The tall and thin boy beside him was called Qian Hao, and the smiling boy was called Li Zhen. Yu Yan, Yu Bing, and Jiang Chun also gave their names and hometowns. Sun Wang looked at the names on the list in his hand one by one. After confirming that there was no problem, he looked up and said, "The dormitory is full now, but every year, there are people who get married and move out, or befriend other villagers and move in. So every year, the young people who participate in the construction will stay here for a few months first. The conditions are bad, so you guys should tolerate it." Everyone expressed their understanding. In order to gain favor with the village chief, Yu Yan raised her head and said, "Village Chief Mr. Sun, we came here to contribute and are prepared to work hard. Don't worry, this bit of difficulty is nothing." Sun Wang saw Yu Yan's proactive attitude and nodded in satisfaction. "Then rest well today. We'll start work tomorrow." Sun Wang said the arrangements and went to work again. Yu Bing looked at the familiar house and sighed with emotion. She was back again. Everyone looked at the 3 rooms. One was the kitchen, and among the remaining 2 rooms, one was for men and one was for women. There was also a bathroom at the back. Seeing that everyone had been assigned, Wellbeing said, the boys are in charge of filling the water tank and chopping wood. Yu-Yin, you clean the kitchen. Jiang-chun and I will wash the pot and start a fire to cook. The 3 boys were worried that no one would cook, so when they heard this arrangement, they readily accepted the task they were responsible for, took their tools, and left. Only Yu-Yin walked up to her with an indignant expression. She glared at her and said, why should you assign the tasks? Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 7, Incident During Mealtime. Wellbeing turned to look at Yu-Yin with a smile as she said indifferently, then you can assign the tasks. Yu-Yin looked at Wellbeing and turned around proudly to size up the kitchen. She thought about what simple work she wanted to do. However, when she looked at the earthen stove and the few large pots in the kitchen, then at the rice and everyone's lunchboxes on the table and the vegetables and oil the village had prepared for their lunch, she felt that she could only clean up. Thus, she rolled her eyes at Wellbeing and started to clean with the broom made of straw placed on the stove. The current Yu-Yin no longer hid her dissatisfaction with Wellbeing. Her hatred for her sister made her give up on her plan to be gentle at first. Wellbeing couldn't be bothered to argue with Yu-Yin, but Jiang-chun didn't want to indulge her, so she specifically walked to Yu-Yin and rolled her eyes. Yu-Yin pouted as she watched the 2 of them go against her. She chose to remain silent and only secretly stared at the rice in her lunchbox to see if they had transferred it to Wellbeing's lunchbox. In order to eat early, Yu-Yin didn't play tricks when she cleaned. She immediately cleaned the stove, swept the floor, and swept the spider webs in the corners. With everyone working together, they finally had lunch an hour later. After the meal, everyone gathered under the eaves to chat. There were only a few families in front of the temporary residence. They could see the fields directly in front of the house. The villagers had all gone home to eat. They could only see the rice, which had been mostly harvested already, in the field. The few of them drank warm water and looked at the scene that they could only see in textbooks when they were studying in the city. At this moment, a breeze happened to blow in their faces, making everyone temporarily forget their fatigue from long-distance travel. The scenery in front of them seemed quite unique. Li Jin rubbed his hands. Under the other 2 signaling, he said, Wellbeing, the 3 of us don't know how to cook. Can we eat with you? The other 2 boys also expressed that they would be in charge of fetching firewood and water. Wellbeing agreed readily. All right, then Jiang-chun and I will be in charge of cooking in the future. Wellbeing looked at the silent Yu-Yin and took the initiative to ask, Yu-Yin, if you want to join us, you can be in charge of cleaning our room and courtyard every day. Yu-Yin raised her head proudly and said, I plan to move in with the villagers tomorrow, but I'll still eat with you guys tonight. Wellbeing, your culinary skills are really not that good. After saying that, she even shook her head in disdain. Everyone couldn't help but think of how tasty the food Yu-Yin had cooked was during lunch just now. They didn't think it wasn't good. If it was anyone else asking this question, Yu-Yin might have agreed. However, it was Wellbeing who asked this question. Yu-Yin was even more determined to go against her. She decided to go to the village later to see if there were any families who could cooperate. Before she came, Yu-Yin had already found out that people like them who came to the city to the countryside to support the rural construction could use their rations to go to the villagers' houses. The villagers' families usually raised chickens, and the children at home sometimes went to the river to fish. The people who cooperated with them could occasionally eat meat. When Yu-Yin, who was originally hesitating, heard that Wellbeing wanted her to clean the room and courtyard, she was even more unhappy. Wellbeing didn't know how to cook when she first arrived in the countryside in her previous life. Yu-Yin chose to go to the villager's house. However, when she thought of what happened later, Wellbeing secretly chuckled. This time, she took the initiative to lure her into saying that she wouldn't eat with them anymore. The boys could also tell that although there were 3 girls, there were 2 camps. However, they had come all the way here together. Everyone saw Yu-Yan's actions towards Wellbeing. They were a little unhappy with Yan-Yan's provocative actions and secretly heaved a sigh of relief that they learned that they didn't have to eat together with Yu-Yan anymore. After discussing, everyone returned to their rooms to take a nap. An hour later, everyone got up one after another. This was because the village chief had arranged for everyone to be given 30 pounds of rice and 2 taels of oil per month. However, they could think of ways to buy vegetables from the local villagers or exchange them with stamps and items that the villagers needed. Of course, they could also plant them themselves. Wellbeing planned to exchange for some vegetables, eggs, and vegetable seeds. The boys also took the initiative to pay for the food. After all, they could pay for the rice themselves, but Wellbeing couldn't use her own stamps and money to exchange for the vegetables. After some discussion, they handed them over to Wellbeing for exchange. Wellbeing brought Jiang-chun to a family not far from the resettlement point. This family had a lame widow and 2 sons. The eldest son sacrificed himself for the country during war, and the youngest son was a soldier in the army. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 8, Reporting Wellbeing. The village took good care of her and assigned her the job of raising pigs. She just had to take good care of the pigs. Therefore, although there were no men at home, no one dared to look for trouble. In addition, she was a generous person and had always been popular in the village. When Wellbeing saw the door open, she shouted, "Hello, is anyone home?" "I'm coming." A middle-aged woman wearing a dark scarf was limping, but she looked energetic. Auntie Zhao looked at the two young ladies in front of her and knew that they must be the group of young people who had just arrived at the village today. She smiled and said, "What's the matter?" Wellbeing smiled and replied, "Hello, madam. We're here to build a village. My name is Wellbeing, and her name is Jiang Chun. We want to buy some vegetables, eggs, and seeds from you." Auntie Zhao said cheerfully, "Sure, I can't finish them alone anyway. My surname is Zhao. You can call me Auntie Zhao from now on." As she spoke, she led the two of them to the vegetable field in her backyard. She took a large bunch of each vegetable from the bamboo basket at the side and took some vegetable seeds. Fortunately, you came quickly. Otherwise, I would have had to pick pig grass later. With that, she quickly turned into the house and started picking eggs from the bamboo basket beside the bed. "Young lady, how many eggs do you want?" Wellbeing hurriedly replied, "Madam, I want 6. I'll come back after finishing them." Auntie Zhao chose 6 of the biggest eggs from the dozen eggs. "No problem. You can come to visit me when you're free." Wellbeing knew from her previous life that many people from the construction village would come here to exchange things. This was because Auntie Zhao was warm and easygoing, and the prices of the items she exchanged were very fair. However, in her previous life, because she was focused on saving money and sending food home, she couldn't bear to eat eggs. It was because of a serious illness that she bought 2 eggs from Auntie Zhao to replenish her nutrition. This was the only time they interacted. Jiang Chun took the bamboo basket from Auntie Zhao. Wellbeing replied mischievously, "As long as you don't find us annoying, Auntie, how much are these veggies and eggs?" "I don't mind. Just give me 1 cent for these veggies. 5 cents for 1 egg. I don't need money for the vegetable seeds. I'll give them to you guys." Wellbeing and Jiang Chun looked at the smiling Auntie Zhao and then at each other in embarrassment. If they were to find someone else to exchange this basket of vegetables, they would have had to pay at least 2 cents. As for the eggs, they could only buy them in the city supply company when they had time off work. 1 egg would cost 7 cents, and they had to buy them with stamps. This was because in this era, each family could only raise 2 chickens at most. Their own families didn't even have enough to eat. Due to Auntie Zhao's special situation, the village had discussed and allowed them to raise 2 more. In addition, Auntie Zhao usually lived alone and ate little, so she could sell them to who needed eggs. Wellbeing knew that the old lady wanted people to come and go for the sake of liveliness and didn't care about this bit of money, so she didn't refuse anymore. She only made up her mind to come more often in the future and help the old lady do some work. "Then I won't stand on ceremony." "Thank you." After paying, Wellbeing carefully transferred the vegetables in the basket into the bag she brought. After saying goodbye to the woman, Wellbeing and Jiang Chun walked back. Jiang Chun asked curiously, "Little Bing, how did you know that this woman would exchange veggies with us?" After all, there were a few families nearby, but Wellbeing walked straight to Auntie Zhao's house. Wellbeing's eyes flickered. She pretended to be calm and said, "I chose her randomly. Anyway, I could ask the next family if she didn't exchange with us." Jiang Chun nodded without thinking much about it. Then, she suddenly thought of something and asked, "By the way, why did you say that to Yin on the train?" Wellbeing calmly said the answer she had long prepared. "I just felt that she was deliberately trying to get close to me. It seemed strange, so I was on guard. I want others to think that my family is constantly paying attention to my safety, so they won't dare to bully me." When Jiang Chun heard this, her eyes widened in agreement. At that time, I felt that her smile was a little fake, especially when she said those words to you. I knew that my intuition was right. The two of them chatted for a while before returning to the location. They placed the vegetables in the kitchen. Wellbeing took her eggs and temporarily placed them in the pocket of her bag. Yin was writing a letter on the wooden table. Jiang Chun also took out a pen and paper. "I have to write a letter to report my safety to my parents." Wellbeing finally left the Yu family and didn't want to write to contact the Yu family anymore. However, when she saw Yin, she changed her mind and took out her stationery. "Me too. Otherwise, my parents would be worried." Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 9, Hot Water. From the corner of Wellbeing's eye, she saw Yin stop writing for a moment. Then, when she wrote again, she could see that she was holding the pen even tighter. A smile appeared on Yu Bing's lips. She treated it as collecting some interest from Yu Yan for setting her up in her previous life. Then, she sat at the square table in the middle of the room and started writing something with a pen. After thinking for a moment, she had an idea. She first described the tough life in the countryside in detail. The farming work was heavy, and at the end, she even wrote that her body was even weaker after the journey. She wrote that if she didn't have enough money to go to the doctor, she hoped that her family could support her with more money and stamps. Yu Bing smiled and looked at her preemptive letter in satisfaction. She would kill the Yu family's intention to exploit her in advance. However, in Yu Yan's eyes, Yu Bing was happily telling her family that she had arrived safely. She felt indignant again. She looked at Yu Bing as if she was looking at a thief who had stolen her family and happiness. Yu Bing ignored Yu Yan's gaze and placed the letter into her luggage. She leaned closer to Jiang Chun, who was still writing, and whispered a few words into her ear. Then, she went out to discuss planting vegetables with Lu Ming and the others. Yu Bing knocked twice on the boys' room's open door and said gently, "Jiang Chun and I asked for some vegetable seeds. After all, it's not sustainable to keep buying vegetables." Speaking of which, Yu Bing was the youngest among them. Originally, the three of them thought that with Yu Bing's gentle and frail appearance, she would definitely be a sensitive young lady. Who knew that after interacting with her for a day, they discovered that she was efficient, meticulous, generous, and cheerful. On the other hand, the tall and fit Yu Yan was the fussy troublemaker. The older Lu Ming immediately replied, "I think it's feasible. Since we're here to build a village, we have to be prepared in the long term." The other two agreed and turned over half of the land that the young man who had previously lived here had reclaimed. Considering that it was only for a month or two, they decided to only turn over half an acre of land and sprinkle some water on the seeds. After they were done, it was already evening. Only then did Yu Yan slowly return to the resettlement point. Seeing everyone return from planting vegetables in their own land in exhaustion, she felt that she had made a wise decision by joining forces with the villagers. Then, Yu Yan and everyone handed the lunchbox containing the rice to Yu Bing and steamed it in the pot. After eating, Yu Yan ran out again. Yu Bing, Jiang Chun, and three boys carried firewood and water to fill the two large pots that were used for cooking with water to boil water and shower. One pot was used to heat up the boys' bath, while the other pot was used to boil water. Half of it was boiled to drink, and the other half was used for the two girls' bathe. Seeing that both pots of hot water had been used up, Qian Hao was thinking about what Yu Yan would do and was hesitating about whether to help her boil a pot. Lu Ming saw through Qian Hao's thoughts and whispered, "Let's go back to our room." Just now, Yu Bing and Jiang Chun were in charge of boiling water together, but in order to let everyone rest early after showering, they also took a basin to fetch water. Yu Bing almost fell. But what about Yu Yan? She left after eating and didn't do anything. Why do you still care about her? On the other side of the room, Yu Bing and Jiang Chun were lying comfortably on the bed and talking after taking a hot shower. Bang! The door was pushed open and hit the wall beside it. Yu Yan pushed the door open angrily. "Why isn't there hot water for me?" Yu Bing sneered. Seeing this, Jiang Chun immediately turned around and sat on the bed. "What do you mean by hot water for you? Did you fetch the water? Or did you pick the firewood? Or did you help boil the water?" Yu Yan replied indignantly, "I was assigned to clean the kitchen previously. I've already done it. Why can't I have a share of the hot water?" Yu Bing stood up and looked at Yu Yan as she said softly, "Are you planning to reap all the benefits after cleaning the kitchen only once? Everyone except you picked water together. Don't take advantage of others' hard work. We're not your parents, so we have no obligation to spoil you." Yu Yan didn't think that there was anything wrong with her not working. She only felt that Yu Bing was taking the lead in targeting her. "You guys are bullying me together." After saying that, she rushed out of the door and walked to the kitchen. She saw that there was still half of cold water in the tub. Fortunately, it was midsummer, so Yu Yan could take a simple cold shower. She felt hatred. Mr. Yu and Mrs. Yu, who she had been looking forward to seeing, were also resented at this moment. She hated them for giving birth to Yu Bing, who always went against her. The two people in the room were also talking about Yu Yan. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 10, Work is Important. Jiang Chun said in confusion, "You asked me not to leave the room before Yu Yan left today. Then, I slowly wrote the letter and saw that she had been secretly looking at the bag you put the letter in. However, because I deliberately slowed down, she couldn't wait anymore and left. Little Bing, why do I feel that she really wants to see what you wrote?" Yu Bing also pretended to be puzzled and replied, "I don't know. When I wrote the letter, I felt that she kept peeking, so I specifically told you that." Jiang Chun couldn't figure it out, so she changed the topic. Because they had to start working in the fields the next day, everyone chose to sleep early. The next day, just as the sky lit up, they heard the crowing of a rooster in the village. Wellbeing immediately got up and cooked the rice that everyone had given her last night. She steamed 2 eggplants and picked a little chili sauce from the chili sauce jar she had brought to smear on the cut eggplants. She poured a little soy sauce and cooked 2 eggs for herself and Jiang Chun. Wellbeing looked at the breakfast she had prepared with satisfaction. It looked, smelled, and tasted good. When Jiang Chun saw the egg Wellbeing handed her, she said, "Little Bing, stop cooking eggs for me. You bought this. I can't eat your food for free every time." Wellbeing knew that Jiang Chun's kindness towards her was pure, and she also knew that Jiang Chun wasn't greedy. She wanted to treat whoever treated her well 10 times better. Hence, she could only agree. "All right, I won't prepare it next time. It's already cooked. Eat this first. If you don't want to eat it, I'll prepare yours again next time." Jiang Chun looked at Wellbeing's cheeky smile and nodded helplessly. At this moment, the 3 boys entered the kitchen. The 3 of them drank plain porridge and ate eggplants mixed with chili. This was their first day of work. After dinner, they went to the field early to wait for arrangements. In this era, there was a work score system. The village chief would customize the score according to the amount of work done. For example, the highest score for farming was 10 points. This was because farming was very difficult. If one completed their work on time that day and didn't slack off, the team leader would get a full score of 10 points after reporting to the scorekeeper. If one was late, left early, or was caught slacking, the corresponding score would be deducted. Another example was that one could get 3 points for chasing the sheep raised in the village. This was a simple job. It only took 1 to 2 hours a day. Generally, teenagers would be responsible for it and the corresponding score would be given according to the child's performance. Similarly, the highest score for this job was only 3 points. These work points would affect the food, stamps, and money that everyone would eventually get, so everyone worked hard. This time, Wellbeing was assigned to pull the seedlings. She washed the soil on the seedlings and tied them into a bunch before throwing them to the person who inserted the seedlings. With the experience from her previous life, Wellbeing led Jiang Chun to make various protective measures in advance, like wearing hats and long-sleeve clothes. They were assigned to different groups. At this moment, Yen rushed over. She left the house a little late in the morning. When she arrived at the villager's house, she only saw the child watching the house. Only then did she know that the villagers ate 2 meals a day. She could only come to work on an empty stomach. However, the villager's house she worked with was a little far from the field, so she was late. On the first day of work, she was late. Sun Wang looked at Yen in dissatisfaction and arranged for her to be in the planting team, which planted the seeds into the field. Planting seedlings was more tiring than pulling seedlings, and she had to bend down. Yen walked to the planting team and saw that everyone had been working at a 90-degree angle. She then looked at Wellbeing and understood that Wellbeing's job was easier than hers. She thought about how to swap jobs with her. She came up with an idea and started walking towards Wellbeing. At this moment, Wellbeing was learning from her team leader. Although she had done it in her previous life, there was no harm in learning it again. The team leader saw that Wellbeing's speed was neither fast nor slow, but her posture was standard. She was very surprised by the learning ability of this young lady from the city. She didn't know that the girl in front of her had already done farm work for a few years in her previous life. Wellbeing. Wellbeing turned around and saw Yen looking at her with a smile. She was secretly amazed. The 2 of them had already had such a tense fight yesterday, yet she still came to look for her. Wellbeing smiled and replied, "What's the matter?" Yen immediately pretended to be pitiful. "I want to apologize to you. This is the first time I left home, so I wasn't in a good mood. I treated you badly yesterday. I hope you can forgive me." In her previous life, Yen had always been tough in front of her. Wellbeing didn't expect her to act pitiful. She pretended not to care and said generously, "It's okay, I don't blame you. Don't take it to heart." When Yen wanted to reply, she said seriously, "But Yen, it's work time now. If you want to talk, let's talk when we get back. Work is more important now. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much."